Hey, what's up, friends? I'm excited to be alongside you a little bit for Cornerstone this year, and sad that I'm not going to be able to be right there in Newcastle with you, but really glad to get to contribute to a little bit of the conversation that's going to be going on as you all love and serve and care for people. Kind of doing the Be Jesus. Kind of side of things for a lot of kids and maybe a lot of other people there in the community. So anyway, those of you guys who know me, my name's Will, and I'm a pastor here in the USA, in Kentucky, at a church called Southland, and I've gotten to spend time over there year after year, it seems like. This one I'm going to miss out, but man, I always love getting to just kind of prompt conversations, and so it'll be interesting to see how that works via video this year, but here goes. So I've kind of texted back and forth with my friend Adrian, my friend and yours, Adrian, and as we were talking about this year, and the words abandon ordinary and then maybe embrace extraordinary are what come to my mind. And man, as we do that, what does it look like to abandon ordinary faith and embrace extraordinary faith? Boldness, breakthrough, hope, forgiveness, peace, love, eternity. Like, what does that look like? And as we kind of jump in here for the first time together, what I want to do, like I said, is to promote conversation. It's easy to write up a lesson, kind of sit here and read that to you, or preach it to you, or what have you. But man, again, those of you guys who know me, I'd rather have a conversation than sit and dialogue at people. And so, man, the first thing that I wanted to lead us to is in Genesis. And actually, man, if you have time to read this entire account, it is amazing, going from about Genesis 37 on through the end of Genesis. It's actually a fairly quick read, in spite of the fact that it's like 13, 14 chapters of text. And you can leave out chapter 38 if you really just want to get the Joseph part of the story. But man, this guy Joseph is somebody that I think really exemplifies this extraordinary idea. And Joseph was a favored son. He was the youngest at the time of what would be, I believe, 12. But youngest son, the favorite. Maybe you guys have kind of come alongside a situation or circumstance like that, where you're going, oh man, yeah, that person over there definitely is the favorite. The baby of the family or whatever. Maybe you got a younger brother that you feel like got away with more than you ever were able to. But man, it was a little bit dysfunctional. This dad gave extra gifts, this coat of many colors that you guys may have heard of, and man, it just created bitterness in this family. And so as we start to talk about kind of this extraordinary faith, man, I think we have to kind of lead into the way that Joseph ended up in the end being extraordinarily faithful. But it didn't all start with a really pretty picture. So one of the things that I would encourage, maybe you use this video and you push pause right now and just have a quick conversation, or maybe if you're a group leader, you use this question as something to kind of get things rolling when you have groups after this. But the question that comes to my mind is just to talk about a situation or a circumstance where you had to deal with this ugly situation of favoritism, and what it felt like, and what was the story? What did it feel like? How'd you deal with it? What came of it? All that sort of thing. So if you want to push pause right now, that's fine. But if not, we can keep on moving through. So later in Genesis 37, Joseph is sold into slavery, and his brothers are talking about killing him. And so maybe it's a little bit of a, man, I'm going to survive this. But he's thrown into a pit and sold to slave traders, who then take him to Egypt and sell him to this guy Potiphar, who is an officer of the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Then as we kind of keep going further in Genesis 39, we start to see what it looks like for him to serve in Potiphar's house. And that's where his faithfulness to his God, who is faithful to him, starts showing up. And he's so trustworthy. He's so industrious. He gets the job done, and it's just he ends up in this place of being given high position. He ends up running the jail, basically. And so here he is, kind of in captivity, but kind of also given freedom and license and reign to kind of run the show here. And so here's this faithfulness again that's showing up. It's really kind of sometimes challenging to be faithful on our own. Like I don't know if you've ever tried really, really hard to be faithful or to be good or what have you, but there's the next question, maybe for your groups or maybe it's for right now if you want to push pause on this video. What does it look like? What does faithfulness look like when you try hard to be faithful? And maybe sometimes you get it right, sometimes you get it wrong. Like, just talk a little bit about the idea of faithfulness and what that looks like in life. So if we do keep on rolling, man, the next thing that comes up with me with extraordinary faithfulness is Joseph and Potiphar's wife. So Potiphar's wife, for whatever reason, starts to have her eye drawn to Joseph, and she kind of keeps putting pressure on him, and wants to be unfaithful to her husband, and wants to kind of drag Joseph into this relationship. And so one day she kind of corners him because he's tried to stay out of her way, this guy who's trying to be faithful, and she grabs him by the shirt, and Joseph literally has to tear himself away. His shirt comes off in the process. He runs off, terrified, and there she is holding that shirt. And so she reports that he tried to attack her and that he tried to rape her, and which is completely untrue. And after hearing that story, Potiphar doesn't have any choice but to throw Joseph in prison. And so there he is. He's doing the right thing. Joseph's doing the right thing, but feels now, obviously, like he's maybe suffering the consequences for that. But we'll see over time what his extraordinary faithfulness actually does. While he's there in prison, he encounters two guys that used to work for Pharaoh himself. So the top dog in the land, his cupbearer and his chief baker are in prison there with Joseph. And so something obviously went really, really wrong at a party of Pharaoh's if he's got his baker and his chief cupbearer imprisoned. But each of them have a dream one night, and Joseph, prayerfully, his connection with God enables him to know what the dream means, and he interprets that for each of those guys. And one of them, he says, "You're gonna die." Sorry. And the other guy is like, "You're gonna be set free, but when you're set free, remember me. Make sure that you tell Pharaoh about me." So exactly what Joseph said through the Lord's interpretation happened, and then he's forgotten. So here's Joseph, every reason to be bitter, every reason to give up, every reason to not be faithful, and just to say, forget it. What use has it been to stick with God? But he doesn't do that. He continues to be faithful. So a couple of years later, he's remembered, thankfully, and the chief baker nudges Pharaoh to check with Joseph about a disturbing dream that he had. And so Joseph comes out of there and obviously still prayerfully interprets that dream. And as an interesting chain of events comes around, Joseph is made the second in charge of Egypt. And I don't know if you've experienced like I have, but a lot of times the top person in charge doesn't do most of the work. It's the second in charge or the third or more. And maybe you could even push pause right now and have a conversation about how that works at the place where you work or have worked. But here's Joseph. Man, he has been beaten up. He's been thrown in the pit. He's been sold into slavery. He's been falsely accused. He's been forgotten in a dungeon. And still, he's just got this connection with God that has never been taken away. It's almost like you strip everything else away, and he's still got God. And so after he does what he does, if you read in chapter 41, it's pretty amazing how he basically saves all of Egypt from famine and starvation through a plan that God reveals to him. But eventually, his brothers who sold him into slavery come to Egypt looking for food, and Joseph encounters his brothers, and like I don't know. Maybe that's another question you guys could talk about. But what do you think Joseph felt when he runs into his brothers face to face, and they don't recognize him, like they don't know that's him, but he completely recognizes them. Like, what would you do in a situation if you were put in power over somebody who completely wronged you? So maybe have that conversation real quick. Well, as I think about it, man, I don't know how I would respond because I've not been in that situation. I'd like to think that I would do the right thing, etc. But even though it does end up being a real struggle for Joseph to face these brothers who did this to him, he ends up doing the right thing again. And so faithfulness continues to have this thread woven through all of this. But all of that to get to this end place where Joseph meets his father again, and Jacob blesses all of his sons, which is amazing and cool. But after his dad dies, the brothers are scared out of their wits. But here's this place where God's faithfulness, I think, comes to full circle in Joseph and through Joseph, but also the fact that God is extraordinarily faithful is massive. And so he's basically asked, to forgive them. And Joseph says, "Hey, you don't have to be afraid of me." They're afraid he's going to kill him because he's second in charge of Egypt. And he says this: "I'm not God. I'm not going to judge and punish you, because as far as I'm concerned, God turned into good what you meant for evil." He said he brought me into this place of high privilege that I have today so that I could save the lives of many people. So don't be afraid. And so he promises to be kind to them and their families. And so, like, I cannot imagine how gut-wrenching that had to be. But I can tell you that the hard things that life brings, where the extraordinary whatever is required, but especially in this case, like the extraordinary faithfulness, comes from cultivating a regular relationship with the Lord and just spending time with Him. And so I'd really, really love for you guys to, if you don't have that, ask your leaders about that. What does that look like to have a relationship with God that gives you such solid footing that you would be able to be faithful in the same ways that Joseph was faithful throughout all of this, continuing to lean on God, continuing to trust God, and all the way to the point of being able to trust God enough and believe Him enough to know that He could forgive somebody that hurt him terribly, and live in the freedom that comes from releasing that kind of bitterness and unforgiveness. So that's all I got for today. Hope you guys enjoy your conversations, and look forward to another conversation in the next day or two. Thanks. Bye, guys.